The name Cartethyia is long forgotten, lost to time. Do you wish to lose your future as well? Whatever past lingers, whatever future proves, from now on, every moment ahead shall forever be free of the abyss! Light, come hither!
The Wandering Knight of Renaissita, Cartethyia, has finally arrived in the first half of version 2.4 as one of the greatest visual spectacles in all of Wuthering Waves, with a variety of different team compositions that leverage aero erosion buffers or older members of the roster. With an initially complex kit but deceptively simple playstyle, damage amplification, and a lot of grouping. As an aero, basic attack damage, HP scaling character that synergizes heavily with aero erosion, units like Aero Rover, Ciaccona, Sanhua, and even Alto can get a ton of mileage out of her kit, and it's clear she has a variety of different team compositions that will allow her to thrive on release, but some meaningful restrictions based off of her scaling. With that, welcome to our full-scope, comprehensive guide to Cartethyia, the newest addition to Wuthering Waves, and I'm here to break down everything when it comes to how she works, what her best equipment will be, and the steps you need to take across her team building and rotations to make the most out of her insane damage and buffing potential. As always, if you're enjoying this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. Cartethyia, with her baseline kit, focuses on rotating through her moveset to first apply massive self-buffs to her damage and aero erosion stacks to enemies before transforming into her big mommy form to take advantage of those buffs and consume those aero erosion stacks to deal massive amounts of damage to her enemies. Her baseline form, Small Cartethyia, is where it all begins. Small Cartethia's playstyle focuses entirely on generating 3 unique sword shadows that, when consumed, will grant her massive buffs in her manifest state activated by using her Resonance Liberation. Generating these swords in the first place is simple. The first method is by simply performing a 4-hit basic attack chain. On the 4th hit, she'll apply a stack of aero erosion to target's hit and summon the Sword of Divinity. Each unique sword will trigger a special icon on her Forte circuit. The second sword, the Sword of Discord, can be generated by using either a heavy attack or her intro skill. Her intro skill will also inflict 2 stacks of aero erosion on target's hit and advance her attack chain to the second stage, while the heavy attack will only summon the sword. Her third sword, the Sword of Virtue, is summoned by using her Resonance skill, which launches and plunges enemies into the ground and inflicts 2 stacks of aero erosion. This attack can be used in the air and also deals basic attack damage. All 3 of these swords are unique, last 20 seconds on field, and have no benefit from summoning multiple copies. She can consume these swords by performing a plunge attack. The damage of this plunge attack will increase based off the number of swords consumed, and each sword will grant a unique buff during Cartethia's manifest state. This attack is also dealt as aero erosion damage, and it's the only move in Cartethia's kit that scales directly with this damage type. Cartethyia activates this state for 12 seconds by using her Resonance Liberation, reducing her HP by up to 50% while transforming her into Fleur-de-Lis. This can be used in the air. While in this state, Fleur-de-Lis has a drastically different moveset from her base form. Her basic attack is replaced with a 5-hit attack chain, her jump is turned into an upward slash, her heavy attack turns into a thrust that can be followed up with a basic attack to perform a large AoE blast, and then that can be followed up with another basic attack that will perform her jump attack. Her mid-air attack transforms into a 3-hit attack chain, and her plunge attack immediately performs the 3rd hit of this chain. After performing the 3rd hit, you can follow up with the 3rd stage of her basic attack. Her Resonance skill becomes a 2-part attack that initially summons a force field to pull in enemies, while the second summons a giant sword shadow that slams down on targets. This can be followed up with the 3rd hit of her basic attack chain. These skills can also be cast in the air and will additionally reset her mid-air attack chain. You'll have a limited amount of time to cast the follow-up skill after the first cast before it goes on cooldown. Fleur-de-Lis also has a unique intro skill in Manifest, but this won't be frequently used. It also advances her to the second stage of her attack chain. All of these attacks generate Conviction, Fleur-de-Lis' enemy's Forte circuit, which is used to perform her special Liberation nuke. We'll talk about that in just a second. While in this manifest state, every sword consumed as small Cartethyia grants a unique buff to Fleur-de-Lis's attacks. The Sword of Divinity, triggered through basic attacks, amplifies her Aero erosion damage by 50% and decreases its damage interval by 50%. The Sword of Discord, triggered by an intro skill or heavy attack, causes her Fleur-de-Lis attacks, like her 5th hit of her basic attack chain, the 2nd stage of her mid-air attack, her heavy attack, and her 2nd resonance skill, to spread the highest number of Aero erosion stacks across enemies hit to all enemies. The Sword of Virtue, triggered by her resonance skill, causes the 4th hit of her basic attack to stagnate enemies and also grants her significant interruption resistance, making it easy to land all of her combos. These buffs are incredibly important because Fleur-de-Lis has a unique interaction with Aero erosion while in this state. The 5th hit of her basic attack chain, the 2nd stage of her mid-air attack, and the 2nd cast of her resonance skill will all consume a stack of Aero erosion on the target's hit and immediately deal its damage. This means you'll want a lot of stacks of Aero erosion on your enemies to deal as much damage as possible as Fleur-de-Lis, making the outro skill of Aero Rover, who doubles the maximum number of stacks of erosion from 3 to 6, very important for this part of her kit. It's also important for another reason, her 2nd ultimate. With the full Forte circuit, Fleur-de-Lis can activate her finishing move, Blade of Howling Squall, which consumes her circuit, ends manifest, restores 50% of her max HP, and then deals Aero damage in a massive area in front of her and removes all stacks of Aero erosion on target's hit. Each stack removed amplifies the damage of the ability by 20%, for up to 100% damage amplification at 5 stacks. With Fleur-de-Lis's built-in stack removal on various attacks in her kit, it might seem like Ciaccona, who applies over 25 stacks of erosion across her kit, might feel necessary. But don't lose hope if you don't have the Bard. In Ciaccona form, she applies 5 stacks of erosion through her intro skill, 4th basic attack, and resonance skill, and while in Fleur-de-Lis form, her Liberation button can be freely used to swap back to Ciaccona as long as her Forte circuit isn't filled, allowing you to perform actions like her 4th basic attack and resonance skill to reapply the stacks to enemies. The 12-second timer on manifest will also pause when you switch out. This unfortunately does extend your rotation time on her, but when performed in teams without Ciaccona, you can still retain some big damage boosts for your finishing attack. When factoring in all of Cartethyia's abilities, resources, and interactions with each other, she has a surprisingly simple playstyle that involves introing in, using her 4th basic attack, casting her resonance skill, and then performing a plunge attack to summon and consume all 3 of her shadow swords. You'll then activate her Liberation and perform a variety of different attacks to consume Aero erosion, apply its damage, and also build up her Forte circuit to charge up to her 2nd Liberation. Without an off-field Aero erosion applier like Ciaccona, you can opt to swap back to Ciaccona form to reapply erosion stacks before returning to Big Mommy forms to deliver the final blow. At the end of the rotation, you'll swap off of her to activate her outro skill, which amplifies the Aero damage of other Resonators on her team by 17.5% to targets with debuffs for 20 seconds, making it a powerful buff for units like Aero Rover or Ciaccona. When it comes to her inherent skills, Cartethyia has some of the most unique ones in the game. Her first grants a 20% healing bonus and interruption resistance to other Resonators on her team, and also grants a special buff to Aero Rover that generates 25 stacks of their 120 stack Forte circuit when they use their Resonance Liberation. This can greatly speed up their rotation time on their initial rotation. Her 2nd inherent skill causes enemies with 1 to 3 erosion stacks to take 30% more damage from her in either form, while those with more than 3 stacks take 10% more for each additional stack they have, up to 3 or 30%. Cartethyia is a character with a lot of built-in self-buffs to her damage and a significant amount of Aero erosion application, but it's clear that she won't be able to reach her maximum damage potential without Aero Rover's outro skill and constant swaps back to her smaller form during manifest or an off-field Aero erosion applicator like Ciaccona on her team. But she still performs fantastically in traditional support buffer lineups like with Shorekeeper and Sanhua, as only one attack in her kit directly scales off Aero erosion damage. When it comes to actually building Cartethyia, starting off with her skill priority, you'll want to maximize her Forte circuit as it impacts the scaling of Fleur-de-Lis's main attacks, then her Resonance Liberation, which is a significant part of her damage output, and then her normal attack, as her enhanced plunge is a big part of her rotation. Her Resonance skill is also significantly worth investing in as well. Her intro skill, on the other hand, shouldn't be leveled up past 6 to save on weekly boss mats, as the scaling isn't very impactful. Now, let's talk about Cartethyia's weapons. And while her HP scaling may seem like a deterrent for many 5-star options which have high base attack, they can still perform very well on her. Here's what the calculations are looking like using Emerald of Genesis, the standard 5-star sword, as a baseline. Credits to Pridewind. Let's explain these results, starting off with her signature, Defier's Thorn. This weapon provides a very low base attack of 412, which doesn't matter for Cartethyia, and a whopping 72.2% HP main stat, greatly boosting her damage scaling, which is entirely focused on HP. Its weapon effect further increases her HP by 12%, and after using an intro skill or basic attack, causes her attacks to ignore 8% of the target's defense. She also gains 20% amplification against targets with at least one stack of erosion. This is easily Cartethia's best-in-slot weapon due to its massive boost to HP and incredible damage boosting effects, but lacks an important stat for every DPS, crit, making it potentially hard to optimize around. Other weapons, on the other hand, do have those stats. The next best option is Camellia's signature, Red Spring. Despite its high base attack and 12% attack bonus, the weapon's crit rate and 30% boost to basic attack damage perform wonderfully for Cartethia's damage profile, making it the second best overall choice. The third best option is one that most players will likely have, Emerald Genesis. All this weapon provides is its crit rate and energy regen, but its value as a stat stick is fantastic considering those are both stats that Cartethyia needs. Another option is, surprisingly enough, Brand's signature, Unflickering Valor. This weapon's low base attack is not a problem at all for Cartethyia, and it also provides an 8% crit rate and up to 48% basic attack damage bonus buff, but it provides far too much ER than necessary for her rotations. Cartethyia unfortunately does not have very much synergy at all with 4-star options, as they all primarily focus on attack, but she does have a small amount of synergy with the 3-star weapon, Guardian Sword. This weapon has an HP main stat, but boosts resonant skill damage and should genuinely just be considered as a last resort. It's highly recommended you just use Emerald Genesis instead, as it's easily accessible on the selected standard weapon banner or from the UL45 box. Now it's time to move on to Cartethia's Echoes, and she has one clear best-in-slot option with Windward Pilgrimage. This set grants her a 40% arrow damage and 10% crit rate buff as long as you hit a target with arrow erosion on it, and that is guaranteed to happen with Cartethia's kit. If you're looking to get her up and running as soon as possible, Sierra Gale and Gust of Welkin will also perform fine, but just as stopgaps because 10% crit rate is a lot. When it comes to her Echo main stats, however, this is where things get a little bit spicy. Cartethia's optimal main stats, regardless of her weapon or teammates, will differ from pretty much every other unit on the roster. You'll want to run 2 4 costs, focusing on critical stats, and 3 HP 1 costs. 4-4-1-1-1 is back, ladies and gentlemen. This is due to the fact that Cartethia's built-in arrow damage bonuses on her inherent skill, her incredible scaling with the flat HP stat on 1-cost echoes, and her lack of crit on her signature. She'll still perform on the traditional 4-3-3-1-1 set, but keep this in mind as you're grinding Windward Pilgrimage. If you're using her signature or Unflickering Valor, you'll want 1 crit rate 4 cost and 1 crit damage 4 cost, and while if you're using Red Spring or Emerald Genesis, you'll want 2 crit damage 4 costs. Your active Echo should be Remedy Fleur-de-Lis. It's her sword, after all, and she gains some significant buffs of 20% to all arrow damage while using it. When it comes to substats, you'll prioritize crit rate, crit damage, ER up to 120%, HP percent, and basic attack damage percent substats. She'll also benefit from Liberation damage rolls, but not very much at all from Resonance skill or heavy attack rolls. The last area of investment when it comes to Cartethyia involves your wallet or a lot of saved astrite. Thank God the top-up bonus has reset. It's her sequence nodes. Big thanks to Pridewin for calculating the damage increase per node. Her first node grants her a unique buff called Zeal after defeating enemies with erosion on them for up to 10 seconds. This effect will be consumed to spread the highest number of erosion stacks to all enemies hit by her next attack, with a cooldown of 1 second. This node also grants her a stacking 25% crit damage buff for every 1/4 of her Forte circuit filled in Fleur-de-Lis form, up to 100%, and is consumed upon casting her second Liberation. Her second node removes a reliance on Aero Rover completely, increasing the stack limit of arrow erosion from 3 to 6 after using her Liberation. Her next attack also inflicts 3 stacks of erosion on its target and triggers its damage without consuming any stacks. This node also increases the damage multipliers of Ciacconia's basic and heavy attacks, dodge counters, and intro skill by 50%, while also increasing her plunge attack modifiers by 200%. She also reduces the cooldown of her resonance skill by 1 second for every sword consumed during the plunge attack. This one is pretty huge. Her third node causes her Fleur-de-Lis form's 4th basic attack, mid-air attack, enhanced heavy attack, and second resonance skill to inflict 2 stacks of erosion to all targets hit, while also increasing the damage multiplier of her Liberation by 100%. Her 4th node grants a 20% damage bonus to the entire team when any elemental debuff is applied to an enemy. The 5th node grants her additional survivability, granting her a 20% max HP shield for 10 seconds when taking fatal damage, while also reducing the HP cost of her ultimate by 25%. Her 6th node, the big one, causes her second Liberation to immediately max out erosion stacks on an enemy, and also does not remove these stacks after it hits. And after using either of her intro skills or either of her Liberation casts, Fleur-de-Lis gains a new passive that causes arrow erosion to immediately deal its damage when stacks are applied to a target at max stacks. These enemies also take 40% additional damage from her attacks. Now Now that we've covered Cartethia's build, let's get into some of her teams and optimal rotations. And boy, oh boy, does she have a lot to work with. She's got two specific archetypes that focus on leveraging Aero Erosion or a traditional hypercarry style. So no matter who you have on your roster, you'll be able to make some use of this unit. This means her best partners will be Aero Rover, Ciaccona, and general buffers like Sanhua and Alto. Cartethia's best erosion team on release will feature Aero Rover as the sustain and Ciaccona as the buffer. To start off this team's rotation, you'll basic attack twice on Aero Rover, then cast the Resonance skill and attack in the air 2 times to generate their Forte circuit. You'll then plunge attack and immediately attack to trigger their 4th basic. You'll then cast the Resonance skill again, use 2 more air attacks, and instead of plunging, use the Resonance Liberation to cap out their Forte circuit, land from the air, and then use their Forte enhanced Resonance skill and then outro skill to Ciaccona, performing her intro skill and the second half of their skill. You'll then basic attack 2 times and cancel her 4th basic attack's animation with a jump, then use her mid-air attack and cancel her 4th basic attack's animation with the Resonance skill. You'll then use her fully stacked Forte enhanced heavy attack, cancel it with her Liberation, and then outro skill to Cartethyia to summon a sword. Once Cartethia's in, you'll then basic attack 3 times to summon her 2nd sword, and then use her Resonance skill to summon the 3rd, then use her enhanced plunge attack. Then you'll activate her 1st Resonance Liberation to transform, then use her 1st Resonance skill and then attack 3 times in the air. Then you'll use her 2nd skill, land on the ground, and then basic attack 3 more times before finishing off the rotation with a heavy attack, her enhanced heavy attack, and then her 2nd Liberation and intro skill onto an Aero Rover. Across this rotation, you're free to use all 3 Resonator's Echo skills whenever you wish, because, well, they're all summons. The only difference on future rotations is that Aero Rover will intro skill in the air, ready to perform their special air attacks, shortening future rotations. For this team, at max investment, you'll want Windward Pilgrimage on Aero Rover and Gusts of Welkin on Ciaccona, along with her signature weapon. For a budget option, feel free to use Rejuvenating Glow or Moonlit Clouds with the Bell Turtle on Aero Rover. For a more free-to-play friendly team, you'll want Cartethyia, Sanhua, and Shorekeeper or Verena. Starting off on Shorekeeper, simply build up Concerto on Shorekeeper using her basic attacks, Resonance skill, and Forte enhanced heavy attacks before casting her Liberation to top off her Concerto, activate the Bell Turtle Echo skill, and then outro skill to Sanhua. From here, use Sanhua's skill and Liberation and activate her Detonation heavy attack. During this animation, swap off to Cartethyia and use her Resonance skill and then swap back to Sanhua to top off her Concerto, use the Impermanence Heron, and then outro skill to Cartethyia. From there, you'll perform the exact same rotation in her Aero Erosion team without the Resonance skill as you've cast it earlier, and then cast her Liberation to transform and perform the exact same rotation listed above for the prior team. You'll then outro skill to Shorekeeper to cast Discernment and end the rotation. This team performs incredibly well in pretty much all forms of content, as Sanhua's basic attack outro buffs a significant portion of Cartethia's overall damage. However, there are a lot of wasted buffs in this team, like the attack bonus from Rejuvenating Glow or Moonlit Clouds, but it's enough for players who might not have Ciaccona or don't have her fully built. Some time-saving techniques you can try for Shorekeeper include canceling her 3rd basic attack's animation with a skill or Liberation, or dash canceling out of her heavy attack. If you're using a Verena, make sure you start off the battle on a different character so you can swap to Verena, advance her attack chain, and basic attack until you generate her Forte stack, and then use a Resonance skill, Liberation, and then jump in the air for air attacks until her Concerto is filled before proceeding with the rotation as usual. When you end Cartethia's rotation with Verena, make sure you outro skill to Sanhua instead of Verena to repeat the tech. You can opt to swap Sanhua for Alto for his more general buffs to Aero damage, but his increased rotation time and smaller overall buffs make him a lower performer compared to Sanhua, but he is pretty stylish with what he can do. Cartethyia also possesses a fair number of swap windows across her animations that make dual DPS quick swap lineups with characters like Chang Li potentially powerful, but since this is an early release guide made for the average player, we won't dive into too many of these advanced mechanics for now. Since we covered Cartethia's team rotations, it's time to talk about Cartethia's, and she has pretty general rotations with only a few tips to either sustain her Aero Erosion stacks or simply save time on her rotation. The first is before her main rotation, where she can Resonance skill during the Concerto buildup of a teammate to skip it in her main rotation. This can be done in all teams to save a bit of time. After introing in, she'll then press basic attacks until she generates a sword, skill if she didn't prior to the rotation, and then use a plunge attack to consume all of her swords and transform into Fleur-de-Lis. In this state, you can use a variety of different attacks and combos, but the most consistent one involves using a Resonance skill to group enemies and launch herself into the air before attacking 3 times in the air, using her 2nd Resonance skill, then attacking 3 more times when she lands on the ground to trigger her stagnation and Aero Erosion consumption. Then you use her heavy attack and then enhanced heavy attack. If you don't have Ciaccona on the team, you can choose to swap back to Cartethyia by pressing her Resonance Liberation button again to basic attack until she applies an Erosion stack, then use her skill to apply 2 more, giving her some extra stacks to consume with the 2nd cast of her Liberation. After casting that ability, you'll then simply swap onto a teammate to restart the rotation. Since this is an early guide, keep in mind that there might be more ways to optimize Cartethia's rotation further, so be on the lookout for more follow-up content if you're interested in new tech. At the end of the day, Cartethyia is one of the strongest DPS characters released in Wuthering Waves that blends a multi-layered kit, debuff application, and grouping into one of the most unique kits in the game, with her main drawback being her lack of synergy with existing attack buffers and her reliance on Aero, Rover, and Ciaccona for her full damage potential. However, her performance in non-Aero erosion focused teams is nothing to scoff at, and her reliance on Ciaccona in particular is similar to other DPSs like Carlotta's reliance on buffers like Jeja. I personally view her inability to activate her inherent skills without sequence nodes or Aero Rover as a bigger issue in her design. It's clear that Ciaccona finally has her best in slot DPS, and those that have pulled her and her weapon will see surprisingly fantastic results in their experience with Cartethyia. But if you don't have Ciaccona, you'll still have great performance with more budget-friendly options. As always, if you enjoyed this content, please hit that like and subscribe button. Peace out.
Are you certain of this path?
Why? Why are you doing this?
You would betray yourself.
This is not betrayal. This is me being true to myself.